Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, Behren Morton sidelined for the second half of spring camp. Big yikes. And also a Tech Hoops intended portal entry who could reverse course. We're into it next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you're going to get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to see you again. Great to be back with you, covering a couple of different fronts here today. We got a basketball conversation on the way, another intended portal entry, and we'll take a closer look at some scholarship numbers that could leave Texas Tech with to play with as far as going out and seeking new guys to make a hand. And of course, we're beginning on a football front as some not so nice news comes across the bow this week that Behren Morton will be sidelined for the remainder of spring camp, essentially the second half of spring camp. So not the best of news there, Chris. I want to get into you also. No time like the present, I suppose, to talk about some of those guys behind Behren Morton and who's going to be getting some opportunity to take snaps there. But as for Behren himself, Chris, what did you make of the news? What are we to make of the news? We got new issues, lingering old issues. How are we going to digest this here today with number 2 on the sideline?
Yeah, I got that email from Matt Dowdy yesterday afternoon, and I was like, oh man, look, I think as you dumb this down, you'd rather have him healthy in July and August than worried about March or April. Okay. But, if we remember back, and I think we even hinted at it on the show because I think that somebody asked us about it or Behren is the one that kind of had said in that first of media availability, it was either before the first practice or after the first practice of spring. So this is what are we talking, 2 weeks ago or so, that somebody had asked him, hey, how's your shoulder? He's like, I still can feel it. And I think people were like, oh no, and I didn't want to think too much about it at the time, but I think it's just been a constant, because I think if you talk to doctors, like the kind of AC joint sprain that, there's different grades to this, but his was, I think enough to where I think most people tell you it's going to ultimately take 4 to 5 months of just kind of rest for it to ultimately heal. So if we start doing the math and counting backward to like that bowl game, and yeah, you had little pockets of rest in there, most of December, he kind of was idle. And obviously, January, February, then we get into mid-March when spring practice starts. Well, that's just 2.5 months. That's not the 4 to 5 that it may require to ultimately just let it go away. And I think that it's also one of these injuries too that the medical people often say about AC sprains. Look, you can't really hurt it worse. That's why he was able to continue to play. But it's twofold. Like, you can't really hurt it worse, but you're just spinning your wheels when you continue to practice and use it. And ultimately, until you sit back and shut it down a bit for a lengthy period of time, it's gonna be there. So it's kind of, and there's probably a different phase of the conversation we can transition into, but that's kind of, I didn't like seeing it. He needs to practice. He needs reps. You worry and you just hope there's nothing else there. I don't think that there is, but we would have no way of knowing if there's something more severe. But I think it's just an AC joint sprain that just hasn't really, had time to heal. And I think they're just saying, we got, 2 weeks of practice in. Let's let's give the ball to these other younger guys and let's see what they can do with it for the remainder of the spring. So,
are we anywhere near? I know if we'd look at a certain type of quarterback's profile, I would say like Tyler Shuck. I mean, was such an old head as far as college football.
I know what you're going to ask here.
Film room dude, student of the game. I mean, is Behren Morton? Is he in that kind of category where we would say, you know, the reps necessarily, like mentally, are not the most important thing, or is he still a guy that's like, no, every single rep is very important? I don't mean to diminish reps for anybody, really, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, and he's also somebody that's been dinged up a lot.
Yeah.
And so with that, he hasn't been able to practice a lot. You go back to, what was it, 2 years ago, he had the high ankle sprain that he just kind of had to deal with, and that kept him out in and out for periods of time, couldn't really practice. You know, Tyler Shuck has had the bulk of the reps the last 2 springs, with Behren, I think, having a pretty good dose last spring, not so much the year before. And then basically ever since Behren like played last year, you know, when that West Virginia game, and so the remainder, remember we were documenting this. Joey would talk about it often, like he's not really practicing. You know, like he's not, he hasn't practiced week to week. You know, he's like, we're trying to get him to the game, get him through the game, and then like we're just gonna like, you know, and so I think he need, and here's the thing too. Yes, he needs reps, okay, because he's an older guy with some experience, but just not a ton of practice time under his belt for the reasons we've noted. But it's also important that he's got a lot of new pieces around him. Up front, around him, and all that timing, chemistry, everything is just valuable. So I think he's going to be out there. I think if you were to go out there, and I haven't been out there, but if you go out there, he'd be standing there and kind of going through mental reps and all the things, and participating as much as he could. He's just not going to be throwing in contact. So
he's not standing out there like in an Oculus VR headset, like doing because that's a thing now. I know they do that.
And your new facility is going to have some state of the art, like a room, a fairly big room, dedicated to where the entire, like you could put your entire offense up there, actually, whatever, and then the VR will show you an entire defense, and they'll move it around and let you. I mean, it's going to be pretty fascinating. Yeah. I know you didn't mean to go that route.
Well, I do remember that from the rendering, seeing that. It kind of made me think of it. I didn't know if they were doing some of that already.
Oh, yeah. Well, they have QB rooms and some of that virtual reality stuff, but this is going to be like a whole sides of the ball type stuff as they transition. Yeah. But
immersive.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Well, it kind of sounds like the answer may be no to that question. Like, no, he's not just some old gray-headed college quarterback you can sit over there and say, well, he's seen enough to know. He's seen a lot, but he's not quite in that category, it doesn't sound like. I am curious. Let's take a closer look at the timeline as far as the shut them down aspect, because we leave the season. It's been I don't know, about 3.5 months, 2.5 months till you kick open a spring camp kind of door. Maybe you got close to 4 since your bowl game was a little bit earlier. You leave spring camp. We look ahead to the regular season. What are we talking about? Another 4 months, another 3.5 months when we're talking about kicking off fall camp. So I'm just wondering aloud, like, is this going to be enough time again this next time around when he's quote unquote shut down?
Yeah, I think that maybe that's why they're doing it now, just to ensure. But I mean, I think that it would be safe to say he'll be throwing in June, July-ish and be ready for August 1 kind of thing. You know, like and again, it's not like he's got his arm in a sling. Yeah, it's not like it's just kind of like this. This people that have had these before will tell you it's kind of like just having like a constant headache inside your shoulder, like where it's just kind of like
sounds nice.
Well, yeah, just like a steady kind of irritating kind of pain. And I think the more you use it, like in a quarterback, because a few days of rest, it's like, I feel pretty good, zip that ball around or whatever. But then it's like as practices stack up and all those, because I don't know what the number is, but a quarterback is going to throw a ton of footballs in a spring practice. I mean, with the drills and just everything, you're gonna put, I don't know, 100, 150 reps on your shoulder each, and most of those throws are going to have some, something on it. It's not like you're just playing soft toss or whatever. So, and I just think so I think that they made a decision like, you know what, we know what he can do. And I think Joey said in that email that we got in the press release or whatever, Joey said if we had a game tomorrow, he'd be our starter and he could play through it and all those things. But I think they're just trying to, again, what did Brett Yormark say? We're trying to make sure that Behren is the best version of himself. Like that. Yeah. So
it is a new era as far as thinking about the QB room, not only with the starter, at the wheel, knowing going into the year this is your thing, but also the depth behind him. And I hope there is some depth behind him. But what's the makeup of that group looking like who's now going to get that opportunity?
This is where the conversation gets really fascinating.
First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, and say adios to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset, a 1 seed, or anything in between, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, overs, unders. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. With FanDuel,
this is where the conversation gets really fascinating. And I don't want to say, because I think we could play both cards here. We can play the exciting card. We can also play the nervous or kind of scary card here as you kind of play this out. So it's now left with Jake Strong, Cameron Brown, and Will Hammond. And so let's say there was a game Saturday, and let's say that Behren was going to start, but let's say he didn't finish. Who's going in?
Yeah.
Let's say that he twists an ankle. Who exactly are you going to start going to Provo, Utah, and playing at BYU? Are you going to go with Jake Strong? Are you going to go with the stud Elite 11 quarterback in Will Hammond? You going with Cameron Brown, who's more of a change of pace kind of quarterback that I think that they were looking to use in some capacity anyway. And so that's where it gets a bit tricky. I don't know if there's a no-brainer answer there. And I think that that's the one positive here. Is that, okay, it's not ideal when your starting quarterback gets shut down for the remainder of the spring. It's not ideal that he's got something just bothering him a bit to where you need to rest it. Okay, so we get past that. And then the timing and chemistry and all the reps that you may need that you're going to lose. But the payoff here could be like a lot of these backups sorting through that and figuring out where that sits. I also think it's important to note in this day and age, and I think you're naive if you don't think about these things, because I guarantee you Joey and Kitley and every head coach, offensive coordinator in the country has thought about these, or they should have. What happens if one of our guys leave after spring? What if it didn't go well for them in the spring? What happens if somebody leaves?
That's true. Yep.
And what now? And so I would doubt that, Will Hammond or Cameron Brown would look to leave because they just got here. But play it out in your head and what if Will Hammond and Cameron Brown, if they are playing better or surpassing a guy like Jake Strong, does he see it through? I mean, again, these are hypotheticals, but I think you have to understand the way that college football and obviously basketball works these days, but it's specifically like football with the way spring practice and that position in particular. Guys don't wait. They seek more playing time. They seek, this or that. And it's that position more often than not. And so, I think I wouldn't be surprised at all if there was like some movement at that position, but also wouldn't be surprised if these are the three guys that you go into war with either. So
Yeah.
I just think you need to be prepared for that thing. But I think people are going to like Will Hammond, man. He's just young, and I'm glad he's here. Imagine if he wasn't here. Imagine if he hadn't enrolled early.
Man, that's true. I didn't even think about that. He's an early enrollee, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, he's an Elite 11 guy. By the time you get some weight on him and all that, because I mean they're sending out these GPS numbers with him. They're talking about all his legs. We know from talking to enough people through his recruiting process how smart he is, student of the game, which Kitley and McGuire and all those guys are going to love that. That's what they love about guys that just love it back, right? And then I think Cameron Brown is somebody that is going to factor in. I mean, we start hearing like Kenny Perry talk about, maybe we'll use him on special teams. That tells you what kind of athlete he is. But he's 6'2", 230, and I don't know if he's like the true backup type guy that he would eventually be that, but he could. And he's also like for example, you got a game this Saturday. I could envision a scenario where like Jake or Will was playing half of it and Cameron Brown was playing half of it because you could do different things with them. So,
well, there's a lot of prep work as a fan too, because I need to know which name to be clamoring for as soon as I'm upset by QB1. Who are we going to yell at Zach Kitley to put in? If we've got three options, we need one clear-cut number 2 option. So then I can make an ill-informed argument that I know better than the OC. This guy should be the guy taking the snap. Maybe that won't come to fruition whenever the regular season does get here. But it's a proud tradition for any football fan, I think, anywhere. The most popular man in any town, the backup QB. But best wishes to Behren on continuing that rehab and hopefully a conversation that we leave by the side of the road as we kick off fall camp. But only time will tell. Okay.
Yeah, well, and real quick though, we were doing. When this announcement came out, John, they've asked John Harris and I to do the TV for the spring game in Midland on April the 20th, and so he saw this release. And he calls me up and he's like, "Well, our little spring game telecast is getting more interesting. When you find out, no Micah Hudson." Now no Behren Morton. I can't imagine you'll see a lot of Taj Brooks. But this is, again, there's reasons for all these things, but it's just kind of fascinating. It's like some of the guys we were most excited about, won't be practicing or aren't practicing right now for various reasons. So anyway, I just thought that was it's interesting. I was like, well, you're going to get a heavy dose of some of these other QBs that everybody's dying to see. We'll see kind of what that looks like.
Yeah, no doubt. That should be interesting, I guess. And again, a chance for us to acclimate to who the next men in line are going to be. Speaking of next men in line, perfect opportunity to segue because there are going to be some new men in line when we talk about Grant McCaslin's Red Raider basketball team as the roster rehab continues this offseason. Let's end there today, Chris. First, today's episode brought to you by Amazon's Fire TV, your destination for sports from live games to highlights and beyond. Fire TV offers incredible viewing experiences with smart TVs as well as the Fire TV stick, which you can just plug, boom, right into your existing television. And you got access to millions of movies and television episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the upcoming college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. And that's not all. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from all of your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. So check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV or Alexa devices. And if you haven't done it already, you don't know what you're missing. Trust me on that. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Lamar Washington, the next guy reported to be intended to hit the transfer portal. I don't think this one is a big surprise. I suppose there was a possibility that he was going to remain at Texas Tech, but given what his playing time was this previous season, I think all the while maybe a lot of fans were looking at him as someone that might seek opportunity elsewhere. So curious about the context around Washington, and of course want to get into On the other side of that, what we're actually looking at, you think, and this will be some speculation and projection still, but what we're looking at as far as spots to play with, so to speak, for Coach McCaslin with the roster.
Yeah, Lamar, a lot of West Coast ties, I think, and I wouldn't be surprised if he finds a home on the West Coast somewhere going forward that offers him a lot more minutes. Lamar, I guess technically, I hadn't looked this up to be specific, but I think he played quite a bit more, obviously last year than he did this season. I think that when you saw glimpses of him, I think that there were times where he was, like that kind of that warrior type, like where he got in there and mixed it up and like he defended and there was some toughness to him. Like I think about the game versus Houston in Kansas City in the Big 12 tournament when you're just like totally shorthanded. And Darion Williams is out. Warren wasn't playing yet, and Lamar got in there and he scrapped quite a bit for a bit, and then the game obviously got away from you. But he just, from a basketball sense, Lamar is really good in transition. That's where he's at his best. I think he can be a plus defender. I think that maybe that's why Grant didn't play him as much, is because he wanted him to be better on defense. Maybe what I gather, and then. The one thing that Lamar struggles with, and again, he can fix it because this is exactly how TJ Shannon was guarded very early in his career. And it's funny because they're both lefties. But, I remember when Shannon was a freshman, maybe sophomore, but it's like, I think we were playing Kentucky. And he's out there on the 3-point line. And the closest defender is 10 feet away, just daring him to shoot it. Like, and the crowd is like, dude, shoot it. Like, what are we doing? And everybody that's watched the team is like, no, and that's unfortunately kind of like, Lamar's got to develop that perimeter shot to kind of go with his transition game. And that also makes him hard to put on the floor when the game – because, he would pass up a lot of open looks this year. He'd get it, and then he'd have it, and then kind of put it on the floor, and then kind of, give it up, and you could just tell was tentative to pull the trigger there. So, but this one it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. I think it's all about, just trying to seek more playing time. That's also an avenue for these athletes to, hey, man, I just want to play. I don't want to sit here and rot. And so this is an avenue to allow them to seek employment elsewhere, if you will. Yeah. And I think that's what's going to happen here. So, but I would say that somewhere on the West Coast, maybe, we'll just kind of see where he ends up.
I know the second part of my question is still kind of left to be determined because you've got like portal reporting that may not come to fruition, or you've got guys that could hit the portal yet still return to Texas Tech. So is there any easy way to kind of gauge some spots to play with right now, or am I putting you up against a wall even asking you to try to gauge?
Yeah, I mean, I think you go with look, you haven't heard anything about Darion Williams, Chance McMillan, Kerwin Walton, and Emily Yalaho. And I think that there's a reason that you haven't heard anything from those guys, because I think those guys are going to stay here. But again, as we could sit here and talk about, I think they're going to stay. Yeah. And then, 5 minutes after I say that, it's like so-and-so intends to enter the port. You just don't, you don't ultimately know. And until the window closes, and if they haven't entered, then you feel like, okay, now we feel pretty good about our situation here with who we've got, because this can't just be an open-ended free agent frenzy for all time, or otherwise everybody would go crazy, because it would just never stop. It's just not healthy. But I'm so with that, that would give you like 9 available scholarships. But I'm just telling you, I think you're working with 8 available scholarships, because I just am not convinced that Devin Cambridge is going to leave. I'm not saying that he isn't. I'm just not convinced that he's out of here.
Not as cut and dry, maybe, or something.
Yeah, I just think it'll play out a bit. and I think we even said yesterday, like, was kind of surprised by this, like a little bit. There's some, his injury consideration and like the rehab component. It's a bit trickier for him to leave too, just because he's got he's not quite healthy yet, and all those things. And I don't know timetable or whatever, but I'm just not convinced that he's going to leave. I'll just say that. So, but you've got plenty of room, I guess, theoretically, because if you start looking at it, it's like, okay, Drew Steffi enters the portal at semester. Kyron Lindsey is now in the portal, didn't finish out the season with the team. DeMarion Williams is I guess reportedly in the portal. And then you had Joe, you had Warren. They've exhausted their eligibility. I know I'm forgetting others, but you get the idea. There's a whole host of, Pop Isaacs, is another one. So
yeah, and Lamar. So I'm counting like 7 or 8 right there, I guess. So
yeah,
without Cambridge necessarily being in that group. So
because you get 13, you get 13 scholarships, and like last year, they didn't ever really have a situation where they had. I think they carried 12 players, and then when Steffi left, you're really down to 11 scholarship players. And a lot of coaches will not even use all their scholarships because they'll keep one for semester in case somebody gets frustrated where there are in December, and then you can or a late qualifier or whatever. You just want to have something there that you can fill if needed. It's just hard to keep 13 guys happy.
Yeah.
You need some like freshmen or developmental guys on the back end of the bench that understand their role, that aren't like knocking on the door going, "What's the deal, man? Where are my minutes at?"
Wait, what? What?
Yeah.
I sound like you were talking Spanish there for a minute. Developmental into the bench, understand their role guy. I don't know what that is, Chris. I think you're using language from a bygone era. I don't know if that person exists anymore. Yeah, and maybe. Since we have, as we talked about yesterday, just totally destroyed the apple cart across the board in college sports for the most part. I think that December guy, or kind of that mid-year guy you were talking about, whether it's a qualifier or a disgruntled transfer from elsewhere, let's make them eligible. Let's make it a trade deadline type thing. Like, who can we sign for the stretch run? Who can we sign for the second half of Big 12 play or whatever? I think that idea may have some legs, so let's throw it out there and see if it can get some traction. And by the way, speaking of upsetting the apple cart or destroying it entirely, and an idea that could get some traction, on tomorrow's episode, we will get into what is being coined as college sports tomorrow, I think. A totally new idea as to how we're going to approach the football aspect for now, but curious as to how that will bleed over, obviously, elsewhere. So I hope you guys will join us for that as we wrap up the week, and continuing to keep an eye, obviously, on Grant McCaslin's roster. Interesting things there about Devin Cambridge now to pay a little closer attention to as we head into the weekend. So appreciate the insight and time as always, Chris.
Yeah, you bet. We'll see. And until they say anything, you just don't ultimately know. But maybe at some point soon, you get like, hey, I'll be, because this is the thing with these players. It's like there's an announcement for everything. I'm intending to be in the portal. However that's reported. I'm in the portal, that's reported. Or, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm coming back, even though we didn't know you were looking to leave anyway.
Right.
But there's an announcements for all these. And so,
of course,
at some point, maybe you get some of that from, some of these guys that we were talking about that you haven't heard anything from, so, and then you can go, okay, but even then, I guess I read that from Devin, and some people may have misinterpreted that, but maybe that's really what he meant. I don't know. Yeah. Hell bent on being back, again, but I'm going to go back to Commissioner Yormark, best version of myself. I fall short daily, but it doesn't mean we don't keep trying.
Well, I'm going back to commissioner level as well. That's why we're always keeping hope alive, right? Because you never know what the next episode may bring. And
I like that. Yeah.
Sound like there's a little hope here. And yes, if you're not announcing daily on social media what you're doing, are you even doing it? I have decided to get out of bed this morning. I've decided on cereal for breakfast. I will make a left turn at this stoplight.
You a Lucky Charms? What's Captain Crunch guy? You a Lucky Charms guy?
No, I'm
What was
just
your
kind of a straightforward guy. Traditionally, Frosted Flakes would be the jam, although I
Okay.
love all varieties of cereal. I've had a long running beef with Special K because I do enjoy their fruit and yogurt cereal, but they really gear it towards women. They used to say on the front of the box, slip into a size sassy. While I'm buying it, I'm like, I don't really want to be a size sassy, but I
Yeah.
love this cereal anyway. So I don't. What's your route?
Obviously, as you get older, you change it because there's a reason they put the good sugary cereals with all the colorful stuff
Yeah, yeah,
and like Toucan Sam and all the business on the bottom
right,
shelf of
right.
the grocery aisle. So you're sitting on the grocery cart with mom or dad or whoever, and you're rolling along and you're just looking and you're just like, I'll get some of that, get some of that. But yeah, maybe like a Fruity Pebbles.
Okay.
That was way back in the day,
Yeah, you
but
just like straight brand now.
no,
Brand.
now it's like, something more like Rice Checks or oatmeal squares or some shenanigans like that if I'm having cold cereal.
What
So
I've discovered as a married man is that I can get in trouble for eating cereal for dinner. It seems like that's a red flag if I'm going for a bowl of cereal for dinner. So I really don't eat much cereal.
what about me?
Yeah,
Are we not? Yeah, what's going on? I can't eat that for dinner. Yeah.
and then I'll be damned. Next thing I know, I'm hearing her getting a bowl of cereal at night. And I'm like, that's something. We got some wires crossed here, but that's not a question I ask. That's something I keep between us on the podcast. So let's not let that escape these walls. All right. Appreciate you as always, Chris. Appreciate you guys for being out there. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. You never miss an episode. And we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.